In 2025, Utah hit a major financial milestone that most every other state in the country cannot claim right now, and that is a massive $1.5 billion surplus. And here's the crazy part, this pile of cash is just not sitting in a vault somewhere. It's a signal, a warning, and an opportunity all at the same time. And while most people hear about this surplus and they think, well, that's going to mean lower taxes, better schools, more things for its citizens, that may or may not be necessarily true. And in my opinion, what this surplus actually means for the state of Utah and its residents for the next 5 to 10 years just might shock you. And so today I'm breaking down the 3 hidden truths about this surplus and what it means to those who live in the state of Utah. But more importantly, what does it tell us about Utah's future and how it will impact each of us? And if you're a homeowner, a parent, a taxpayer, or just somebody who cares deeply about where the state of Utah is headed, this video might change your perspective as to how you view Utah over the next decade. And so the title of this video promises what this surplus actually means. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Starting off with, why does this money exist in the first place? So let's start right here. How does a state, the state of Utah, end up with $1.5 billion in surplus funds? Well, the answer is this. It comes from 3 main categories. Number 1 is a booming economy. Number 2 is conservative budgeting that you just don't see most everywhere else in the country right now. And number 3, my favorite, is years and years and decades of responsible savings on the part of the government. So this isn't just a one-time lottery play that they just got lucky with a budget ending up in a massive surplus. This is a decades-long strategy that is meeting the expectations of those that put it out in play to begin with, and it's definitely taking advantage of the strong economic boom taking place here in Utah. But there's something that most people miss. A surplus doesn't automatically mean the state is rich. It means the state chose not to spend everything. And that choice actually reveals a lot about what's coming to the state of Utah. Think of this like your personal savings account. Just because you put into your savings account, let's say $10,000, it doesn't mean that you are rich, that you have all this money that you can spend. You're probably more likely preparing for something in the future. And that precisely is where Utah is so unique. And for the first time in the state's history, the reserves exceeded the amount of its actual debt. And that's something that almost never happens in any state. And so how is this relevant for you and I? If we choose to live here in the state of Utah, how does it impact our daily life? Well, first and foremost, it means Utah's prepared and it can actually withstand a recession. And that means it doesn't have to levy more taxes or impose that burden upon its citizens or reduce services. It also means that as a state, we can launch major investments that we couldn't do otherwise because we have the funds to pull it off. And it also means we have breathing room. We have the ability to restructure how we spend our money in the first place, which of course is what it takes to get to this point in the first place. Proper budgeting with fiscal responsibility. But that power and that money also comes with pressure. Because what Utah chooses to do next with this massive surplus will shape the experience of living in Utah for decades to come. And whether you live in Utah or you're looking to make the move here, that's precisely why I'm here. Reach out to me. Let's get the conversation started to make sure that we get you off on the right foot and to get you in the right place to make sure that you're able to take advantage of the economic positioning that Utah's finding itself in. And this is a really good place to have this conversation. So if that's you, start the conversation, reach out to me. You can find my contact information below. But back on topic, speaking of what's happening next in Utah, let's next talk about where this money is actually going, because that's where the story gets even more interesting. Okay, so here's what most people don't really fully realize. That surplus money, that extra money that we have sitting aside, is not just sitting there waiting for us to write checks. And more importantly, the legislature is already planning on what they can do to leverage this budget surplus to make sure that they can get new projects happening here in the state of Utah. And part of that is just stability. That financial stability that we look for in our personal lives is also something that impacts us if it comes from the top down, from the government. And while we're talking about what we choose to spend money on here in the state of Utah, let's talk about the biggest bucket. The biggest single thing that we choose to spend our money on, it's something that Utah spends more money as a percentage of its overall budget more than any other state in the country, and that is education. And look, funding for schools, for education, for public schools, and everything in between is going up, as well as teacher pay. Teachers are now paid in the top 10 in the nation with respect to starting teacher pay. It's also going into additional school programs, CTA pathways, and even the Utah one-fits-all scholarships program. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a student, all of this matters. More funding means better schooling, better education, better classrooms, and more competitive salaries for our teachers to make sure that we're getting the education that we deserve. And as an example, a teacher might just finally experience that pay bump that they've been waiting for years to see. Or a student in rural Utah might have access to a program or something that they've never seen before. All of these things come at play when we have this budget that we can pump into our education so that the future of Utah is just as prosperous as the state that we find ourselves in right now. And the second bucket is social services. Medicaid adjustments, mental health programs, community support networks are getting stronger footing thanks to this budget cushion. And public safety and infrastructure are also receiving increased stable funding, roads, law enforcement, and even prison operations. So on the surface, this looks like a win all the way around: more investment, more stability, more opportunity. But here's where that story flips. Because even with all of this money and all of these investments, this surplus hides a risk that very few people are talking about. Okay, the hidden risks and the trade-offs. Let's get a little bit uncomfortable now, because this surplus looks really fantastic and great until you realize that what if this surplus is sitting on the edge of a financial cliff? And to give you context, over the past decade, Utah has slashed income tax rates several times, removing about $1.2 billion from the state's budget. And because our economy was booming so much, it filled that gap and then some. But what about the future? What if Utah doesn't continue to grow the same in the future as it has in the past? And with federal tax changes coming in 2026 and 2027, Utah is expected to see anywhere from $300 to $500 million less in tax revenue. And that mix between, we're seeing less money come in from taxes, and this is a good thing. I'm a citizen just like anybody else. I love to see taxes go down, which is not happening in most states. But what if those additional costs, because as we know, everything costs more today than it did just a handful of years ago. What if that drop in taxes is not going to fully fund the state's future? And so if you're a teacher enjoying a pay raise, or a family relying on Medicaid stability, or a student enrolled in scholarship programs, the future of those gains might not be as secure as they look. This is the tension. This is the surplus today, but the revenue drop that we see tomorrow. And that's why this surplus is less of a celebration and more of a warning, or just something that we need to be cautious about. Which all of this stuff, all of this conversation leads us to what we really need to talk about. What does this actually reveal about Utah's future? There's a deeper message hidden within this surplus that we're talking about, and this is it. Utah is entering a new chapter for the state's history. On one hand, Utah could really use the money to strengthen schools, to reform housing, expand social services, invest in long-term infrastructure, and build resilience into the state budget. But on the other hand, this surplus could mean we cut taxes, we cut budgets to the point where we can't fuel Utah's development and growth. All of which happens right before we take a big revenue hit, with those lower taxes really not putting that money into the budget to begin with. And so from my perspective, these next 2 to 3 legislative sessions are going to define what Utah is going to become as we look over the next decade. Because I don't look at this surplus as a gift. I look at it as a test. And whether or not Utah passes this test comes down to one thing. How does this money get used, or does it get saved for future years as well? So let's bring this home. Utah's $1.5 billion surplus is historic. It's a great thing. We all want to see our property taxes, our income taxes, and the burden that's placed upon us as citizens to be decreased. And this surplus exists to begin with because of strong economic policies and, most importantly, disciplined budgeting. And look, lawmakers are using it to invest, especially in education and social services, but looming federal tax changes could cut revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars, meaning the future of Utah depends on how wisely we spend our surplus today or save more for the future. And look, you might have clicked this video thinking, well, this surplus is great. It means it's going to be more money in my pocket or better services across the board. But the reality is this: a surplus is not a promise. It's simply a crossroads. And what Utah chooses to do with this surplus now and moving forward will determine where we all end up tomorrow. And this isn't just about budgets and line items and being fiscally responsible. It's about communities and schools, and most importantly, families and the future of what it looks like to live in the state of Utah. And if you want to know Utah's future and how I feel about it, I'm really bullish on the future of Utah. I think Utah does it right to a degree that you almost see nowhere else. In fact, according to US News World Report, it ranks Utah's fiscal responsibility as #1 in the nation. And these numbers prove it to be so. Utah does a really good, phenomenal job in terms of managing our state, unlike so many other states where we find people moving from. And so if that's you, whether you're looking to make a move here from California or Texas or any other state across the country, or even internationally, reach out to me. Let's start the conversation. My team and I are here to be your real estate resource of choice, and we're here to guide you through the process to make sure that you land in the right place with the best possible experience. So you can find my contact information down below. And if this content helps you, please subscribe to the channel so you can stay in touch and get more content just like this to make sure that you're best educated as to what you need to know when making the move to Utah. And if you're looking to learn more about life in Utah, check out this playlist next. And until the next video, thanks.